Although most rides go off without a hitch, the more you drive, the more susceptible you are to getting into an accident, whether it's your fault or not. You can't always control other drivers on the road. So what do you need to know to prepare yourself for this inevitability, and how should you handle the aftermath of an accident? Today, we're going to learn about all that and more.
Welcome to the Rideshare Guy Podcast, the site that helps drivers make more money by working smarter, not harder. Whether you drive for Lyft, Uber, or anything in between, we've got you covered. And now, here's your host, Harry Campbell.
So today we're going to be talking about how to handle Uber and Lyft accidents with Bryant Greening from LegalRideshare. Now, Bryant is a lawyer that I met a few months ago, and we've been sharing a lot of his content around the site and really starting to direct a bunch of our readers to him for his services. And one of the reasons why I like what he's doing so much is because it's very beneficial to drivers at a super potentially stressful time, right? Nobody likes getting into accidents, obviously. And like I said in the intro, I think it's easy for a lot of us to think, oh, we're Superman or we're Superwoman, and that will never happen to me. But, one of the things that you look at when you start driving, you see how many people are bad drivers out there. Whether you're a bad driver yourself, it doesn't matter, right? If there are other bad drivers out there on the road and you're driving for Uber and Lyft, you're putting a ton of miles and putting a ton of time in your car. It's almost like what I said in the intro, an inevitability that you're going to get into an accident. And hopefully it won't be serious, but if it is, there's actually some precautions that you can definitely take. And today on the podcast episode, number 74, we're going to talk with Bryant all about the precautions that you can take as a rideshare driver, since he's dealt with this hundreds, probably thousands of times at this point. He's one of really the leading experts when it comes to personal injury cases for rideshare specific cases, right? So for drivers and passengers too, which is something I learned about today. So we're going to basically think about this session as you're going to have your own personal lawyer. He's going to walk you through everything you might need to know in the event that you get into an accident, which I think is pretty cool. And then of course, he'll share a little bit about how his law firm is helping to work with drivers. And I think by the end, you'll sort of see that if you fall into this situation where the other driver was at fault and you have some type of injuries, you can definitely see how there's going to be a huge benefit to working with someone like Bryant. Now, make sure you stay tuned to the end too, because I'm going to ask Bryant, are there any situations where using a personal injury lawyer would not be a good idea? And his answer may just surprise you. So if you want to reach out to Bryant, or if you want to look at any of the links that we're going to talk about or any of the further information, you can head to this show notes page at therideshareguy.com/episode 74. And I also want to mention, now that tax time has wrapped up, I want to talk about an app called Stride Tax. Now, Stride is not paying me to mention them on this podcast, but I think it's so beneficial to drivers out there that this is the time. If you guys aren't tracking your mileage yet, this is probably the one thing that you should do. And then, as Brian will talk about in a little bit, you might also want to get a dash cam. But Stride Tax is an app that, is available for free on iOS and Android. And basically what it does, it will help you track all of your mileage, your expenses, and pretty much everything else that you might need. So it's built for rideshare drivers, which is pretty cool. You'll sort of see that it has info specific to Uber and Lyft drivers, whereas other apps may be a little bit more general. So there's definitely some benefits there. It's free. And, if you're a driver doing 1,000 miles a week on your car, that could equal a huge deduction come tax time. And you can really offset a lot of your income. So this is a no-brainer. If you didn't do this last year, or if you didn't do a good job, more likely, of tracking your miles, I definitely recommend Stride Tax. And they are an affiliate of ours. So what that means is if you use our link to sign up, we will receive a small commission. So that link for that, you can go to therideshareguy.com/go/stride, STRIDE, or we'll leave a link in the show notes, and you've probably seen us talk about them around the site. So without further ado, there's a lot of great information on this podcast. So let's get started. Attorney Bryant Greening is the co-founder of LegalRideshare, the only law firm in the United States entirely dedicated to Uber and Lyft accident and injury claims. LegalRideshare helps drivers and passengers recover the costs of medical bills, lost wages, and pain and suffering after rideshare accidents. So, Bryant, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Harry. I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be on.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on today because usually when I'm talking to a lawyer, I get a really big bill in the mail afterwards. But I think today I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions and try to get my money's worth.
Well, I'll tell you, this one's on the house.
All right. Awesome. So, before we get into the whole rideshare situation and scene, I want to ask you a quick question. I'm curious to know, why did you become a lawyer in the first place?
being a lawyer is something that I had always romanticized in my head ever since I was a little kid. Watching TV, watching the movies, my cousin Vinny, I always thought, what a cool job to do. And I actually went to college and worked as a journalist for a period of time. And the legal field just kept coming back to me. And eventually I scratched the itch and went to law school, and I've been practicing ever since.
Very cool. Yeah, I guess I can say that I've watched a lot of Law and Order, but I probably like a lot of people, but that's the extent of my lawyer knowledge.
Well, I can tell you the courtroom is not quite as intense as TV shows like that make it out to be.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, cool. Thanks for sharing that story a little bit. And so it sounds like it's definitely a field that you're passionate about. And so I'm curious to know, how did you first get involved with Uber and Lyft, or what was your first sort of experience there?
Well, I practiced as a personal injury lawyer for many years, doing general personal injury. So auto accidents, construction, nursing home type things. And as I was in the midst of that general practice, I started getting questions from Uber and Lyft drivers as they were going through legal claims after accidents, after injuries.
And what year did this start?
2015 that we started answering questions, and then in that same year, it eventually became a Twitter handle, which is where I was answering a lot of questions. Then it became a website, and then it became its own practice.
Wow.
So as Uber and Lyft were growing, LegalRideshare grew right along with it.
Okay, so basically you didn't do anything special. You just kind of started noticing that people were asking all these questions and just kind of adapted to the changing marketplace, or?
Well, I was getting a lot of these questions via social media.
Gotcha.
And when I made the Twitter handle LegalRideshare, it was a place where drivers started to flock to and understand was a resource for information. And it was really the drivers that were the driving force behind the creation of the firm.
Wow, interesting. Okay. So you started noticing that these drivers were asking all of these questions and, figuring out ways to help them, which we'll definitely get into all that and how you do that. So, I guess I'm curious to know, have you seen, since you started this, or you started noticing this in 2015, I'm assuming that there's just been a huge, obviously we've seen that, more and more drivers on the road and more passengers on the road. And are you seeing a huge uptick in your business too, from that perspective?
As the rideshare companies grow, our phones continue to ring more and more.
Gotcha.
We get questions from drivers, from passengers, and from people who are involved in accidents with Uber and Lyft vehicles. So everybody wants to know, what do I do after the accident? How does the insurance work? What do I do, before something comes up? So yeah, we're getting busier as the companies get bigger.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want to talk to you about today, because I think it is a really cool and neat service that you're providing. And I think once you started explaining more to me what you're doing, it's actually very beneficial to drivers. So I want to really leverage your expertise in not only how to handle accidents after the fact, but I'm curious to know, let's back up a little bit. Is there anything that drivers should be thinking about when they first sign up, for example? If I'm a brand new Uber driver, is there anything related to, liability or accidents you think that, based off your experience, I should think about right now that might help me in the future?
There are a couple things that drivers can do to protect themselves in the future. We always say that the more you're on the road, the more likely it is that there's going to be some sort of incident.
Right.
It's just simple math.
You're talking about an
probability.
Accident?
Yeah, talking about an accident, if you're driving around, at all hours of the day, it's more likely that you're going to be in an accident than if you're not.
Yeah.
So the steps that you can take to protect yourself in the event of some unfortunate circumstance would be, one, to make sure that you have the right kind of insurance.
Yeah.
You want a rideshare specific endorsement on your policy, and it's going to cost you more money, but I can tell you it's worth every penny, because then there's not any gaps in your insurance. You're going to be protected, your property is going to be protected, and at the end of the day, it's going to put you back on the road faster. So if you're in an accident, you don't want to lose out on paychecks while the insurance process is underway, and the car's being fixed, and medical bills are, accruing, and that's the first step. Get the right insurance.
Okay. And so for those who don't know, I'll just quickly sort of explain that, right? So Uber and Lyft provide liability and also collision coverage while you're on a trip. They call that period 2 and period 3. But when you're basically online and waiting for a trip, you don't have any, you're not on your way to a customer, but you're still online. The companies don't cover you. It's much lower liability, no collision, and a lot of personal insurers don't cover you at that point. So that's sort of where that rideshare insurance comes in handy. We have a big marketplace on our site where drivers can get more info and see recommended agents. And I'm curious to know, have you found that there's any one or two companies that tend to be best? Because that's a good point you made, right? The drivers, they need to get back on the road as quick as possible. So I'm assuming if you have a really good insurance company that's really, can expedite the claim and everything, that's a lot better than someone who's slow, right?
Absolutely. And we've actually had a solid relationship with Founders agents. Brad Slavin, who's in Highwood, Illinois, does great work for drivers in our community. So that would be a call that I would make immediately if I were you. Gotcha.
So obviously that's based in Illinois. And I guess for drivers outside of Illinois, though, there's still, there's a litany of different options, right, when it comes to rideshare insurance. Is there any one company you found, or is it kind of more just sort of doing your due diligence and figuring out which ones have the best ratings and reviews and stuff like that?
So what I would do is I would make sure that you deal with a company who is well-versed in writing these policies.
Yeah.
Any of the big companies, first of all of the big companies are now starting to roll out these plans because they see an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So if you're covered by somebody that whether it's Farmers or Geico or, Allstate, they're all going to provide you good service. So
Gotcha.
I would shop around.
Okay.
And I would say, who's going to give me the best rate?
Yeah, that's a good tip.
And don't skimp on the coverage in general.
Yeah.
If you have the opportunity to get rideshare insurance, get it.
Okay, cool. So I sort of interrupted you because I think you said that was step 1. Is there a step 2 or anything else drivers should think about sort of in that pre-accident phase?
We highly recommend getting a dash cam installed in your vehicle. And
that's a great idea.
I actually started driving recently and bought a Falcon dash cam.
Nice. You started driving for Uber and Lyft, right?
Yeah, I did. It was really important to me to drive a mile in my client's shoes and
Gotcha.
understand exactly what a day feels like, what the challenges are, what the best and worst aspects of the job are. And the first thing that I did after getting my rideshare insurance is to install that Falcon dash cam
Nice.
for the purpose of evidence. If there's something that happens, whether an accident or, God forbid, an assault, we've heard situations where rideshare drivers have been robbed or beat up. We want evidence of what happened, and we want to make sure that that's preserved so that the authorities can see it or the insurance companies down the road.
Yeah, and honestly, I like to tell people that I think of a dash cam as a cheap insurance policy because for really the reasons that you described. And it's tough, for a lot of these drivers that are getting into driving for Uber and Lyft, and they may have just heard about driving, the opportunity in general, and they're looking to maybe make a few $100 a week, and now I start looking into it and they say, oh crap, I have to do rideshare insurance, I have to do dash cam. Do you think all of these things are sort of necessary, or is it just kind of a cost of doing this type of business?
I think it's a cost of doing business, and it's kind of an initiation fee.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody told me in any case that I work on that I could have a witness to every event, well, I think that's invaluable. And that's what a dash cam provides you, is you've got a witness to your accident, and nobody's ever going to be able to tell you that your version is not correct.
Gotcha.
As soon as the insurance company says, well, we think that you're 30% responsible for this accident, the video doesn't lie.
Right. And I guess especially if you're a good driver and you're not the one, running into other people, I'm assuming the dash cam footage is a lot more helpful in that situation, right?
If you're the one who's causing problems, then maybe the dash cam's not for you.
Awesome. Cool. Well, no, so those are definitely two great tips kind of getting into an accident. I'm curious though, are there any statistics that you found or, just maybe even anecdotally as far as one thing you said is that, the more you drive, the more likely you are to get into an accident. I think you said that at least. And, that's something we've heard, but I'm also assuming that, if you're driving Friday, Saturday nights when there are a lot of other drunk people on the road, right? Isn't that dangerous? Or if you're driving rush hour, right? A lot of these peak times when there are a lot of people, and sometimes during rush hour, there are a lot of angry and in a rush type people, especially here in LA, Chicago, San Francisco, whatever city you might be driving. I mean, are your odds not only increased because you're on the road, but also just sort of the nature of how you're driving and when and where?
Yeah, our call volume goes up around the weekends. Starting on Friday during business hours through Sunday, we get a lot of phone calls.
Gotcha.
And I know that because our weekend calls come directly to my cell phone. So, people are involved in incidents as more people are requesting rides and the roads become more congested. Absolutely.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, so I guess that's the evidence. That's all the evidence I need right there that you probably know firsthand, right? That on those weekends. So, I mean, I guess so sort of for me, knowing that as a driver, I mean, I guess it's tough though, because it's not something tangible that I feel, right? Like I understand, okay, it cost me $100 to put in a dash cam into the car, but with some of these accident situations, it's sort of like I might be taking on greater risk, but it's kind of like that health insurance or, getting sick, right? You don't know it's going to be a problem until it's too late, even though you might be taking on all this additional risk, right?
Well, to your point with the dash cam being an insurance policy in and of itself, I promise you that if you're involved in an accident, you're going to lose more than the $100 to $150 that it would have cost you to put the dash cam in at the beginning. A couple days of work plus the cost of an ambulance bill or an emergency room bill, it's going to far exceed that initial cost, and that dash cam evidence is going to help you substantiate your claim, prove your case, and will hopefully net a positive result for you, meaning you'll be in the black.
Yeah.
You will have that investment will be well worth it.
Yeah. I'm curious. So if you're talking, let's say you're talking to a driver, as a passenger, you're sitting in the back seat of their car and you're telling them all this. Do you think by the end of that conversation, they're convinced to go get rideshare insurance and get a dash cam? Or do you think it's still sort of, sometimes I think some drivers, I myself am probably a little guilty of this at times that, I'm the best driver. I don't need to worry about getting into an accident. I'm not going to be, I'm in control. I don't need to worry about that, right? Sort of that Superman syndrome.
Right. Well, I hope that I'm convincing because that's part of my job is to argue a point and win it.
Yeah.
So I hope that, by the end of the conversation that the driver is convinced that it's a good investment.
Yeah.
We all have that mindset that it's not going to happen to me or that I'm going to be, such a good driver that I can avoid any situation.
Yeah.
But what we have to remember is that many accidents are not your fault.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You could be doing everything correct. You could be sitting at a red light. When could you be more innocent than just sitting at a red light? And all of a sudden, the person behind you slams into your rear.
Yeah.
Or you're going through an intersection and somebody runs a red light. It doesn't matter how good of a driver you are. That accident still took place, and there's still going to be damages that you are responsible for. Again, the medical bills that you might have as a result, the property damage claim. There's going to be a lot that you need to take care of, and you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to be honest, that's sort of what I'm worried about most driving here in LA and looking around and seeing just how many people are texting and driving and not paying attention and all that. So, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I love having experts like yourself on the podcast, because obviously, I've told people a lot of times, you should get a dash cam, you should get rideshare insurance. And hopefully, Bryant, you used one of my affiliate links because I think the Falcon is the cam that we recommend. And I actually have sitting in my car in my driveway right now. But
how do you think I found it? The rideshare guy.
All right, cool. We've actually got a few different cams I'm going to be checking out and reviewing soon. But so far, I still like the Falcon the best as of now. But yeah. So I mean, that definitely is cool. That makes a lot of sense. And so let's shift gears a little bit. And all right, we've done some of our prep work and we've thought about it. And now, though, like you said, right, we could still get hit. I mean, we could still get into an accident, and there's nothing we can do about it. So what happens if if I'm driving for Uber and Lyft, and I guess really, even if I'm a lot of this advice will apply whether you're driving for Uber or Lyft or not. But what happens if I get into an accident while driving for Uber and Lyft? What are the first things I should do or consider?
Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you stop the vehicle where the accident took place and you call the police.
Gotcha.
A lot of people think, if my car's drivable, I'll just drive to the police station. Maybe I'll make a report tomorrow.
Gotcha.
No, we want that report to be done at the scene. And the reason for that is because that's where all the evidence is.
Gotcha.
The responding police officer is going to be able to come, look at the vehicles, look at the placement of the vehicles, the property damage, and make a determination as to who that officer thinks is responsible for the crash. Once you leave the scene, then it's your word against the other driver's word.
Gotcha.
And sometimes that creates a question of fact that you can't overcome. We want to be able to prove this was the other person's fault, no ifs, ands, or buts.
Okay, and this might be a silly question, but do you call 911 or is there another number for the police that isn't urgent?
That's a very good question. You can call 911. You're not going to be in trouble if you do. There is a non-emergency line, and it's different in every city. In
Gotcha.
Chicago, it's 311. I think that's a common, 3-digit number in a lot of cities.
I'm sure you can probably Google it pretty quickly too.
Exactly, and that would be an appropriate number to dial too. If somebody is hurt or you think somebody may be hurt, then 911 is definitely the number to dial because you want somebody out there quickly.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing too, right? I guess first and foremost, as long as if everyone's okay, you can kind of go down and start thinking about the police report route. But I guess kind of understanding if you have any type of injuries or anything like that. Have you found as far as, your clients, maybe they get into an accident and they feel like they're okay, should they still call 911 anyways? Is it usually good to have them on the scenes for any reason? Or is it kind of, if you get into a little fender bender, probably don't need to call, for an ambulance, for example, in that case, right?
You need to make your own decision as to whether or not you need an ambulance.
Gotcha.
But I always recommend that you tell the police officer about any pains you're feeling. If you're dizzy, being jarred can sometimes cause neck and back pain. A lot of people will be involved in what they believe to be a minor event, and they try to be a hero and say, look, I'm fine. I'm a little jarred, but I'm fine. Well, if you tell the police officer that, then when they're filling that report out, it shows no injury, no problem.
Yeah.
And if that's true, if you're not hurt, well, then that's totally fine. But a minor injury at the scene of an accident can become more painful as the day and days progress. So you want to make sure that the officer is aware that you're not feeling exactly right.
Gotcha.
And that way it's documented down the road.
That makes sense. So I'm a driver. Unfortunately, I just got into an accident, but I'm okay. And so I Google the non-emergency line for the police, and they say they're on their way. And I turn around, and in my car, I have 2 passengers sitting back there. What do I do with these guys now?
The first thing you want to do is make sure that you ask them if they're okay. Because, you are at this point providing a service.
Right.
You want to make sure that the customer, the rider, feels safe, even though some traumatic event just happened. And if they are hurt or if they're making complaints, you want to take steps to protect them as well. And
Gotcha.
that would be, again, calling 911, trying to get an ambulance to arrive at the scene. But also, you want to make sure that you get their contact information. And the reason for that is because passengers have a habit of leaving the scene of these incidents.
Right. Because they probably have somewhere to be, right?
Exactly. They've requested an Uber or Lyft ride for a reason. A lot of times they'll jump out. They'll say, I'm fine. I'm just going to request another ride. I'm going to get out of here. That's within their right, and certainly you can't stop them from doing that. But if you could make a polite request for their name and phone number, then down the road when you need witnesses to what happened, when you're trying to establish your insurance claim, well, then your attorney can call those passengers and say, hey, my client is giving me one set of facts. Can you help confirm this? Is this how you remember it? And that'll provide more evidence in your case. the rideshare companies are not going to give up those passengers' names and contact information without going to court. So if you can get it for us, then we're in a much better starting spot.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because I've had drivers reach, fortunately, I've never been in an accident while rideshare driving, but I've had drivers reach out to me, and with that exact situation, and, in the heat of the moment, they didn't get their passengers' contact info, and now they're reaching out to Uber or Lyft, and Uber and Lyft is saying, no, we can't give that to you because of, privacy laws or whatever it might be. So it sounds like getting that contact information from them, and maybe even, I don't know if there's other witnesses, maybe bystanders walking down the street. Are those people important to get to?
Absolutely. So evidence is gold. In every single accident claim, there's two primary people involved, and that's the drivers of both the vehicles.
Gotcha.
Those people both have dogs in the race. Each one of them wants to create a set of facts that is more favorable to them. But if you have innocent bystanders or passengers in your car, well, then all of a sudden you've got independent witnesses who are going to confirm what you say, and that is absolutely beneficial to your long-term goals and the chances for success down the road.
Gotcha. Okay. So is there anything else I should think about while I'm kind of on the scene, or does that pretty much cover it?
I would recommend taking photos of
both
the vehicles. You want to make sure that you've got evidence that your car looked a certain way at the scene, if your bumper's hanging off or if there's fluid, dripping to the ground. You also want evidence of the other driver's car, because the other driver, more often than not, will try to minimize the nature of the accident. They'll say this was a tap. There was, I don't know what this guy's talking about and saying that there was a major impact. Well, if you can show that at the scene, his car sustained substantial damage, his bumper was hanging off, his hood was dented, that's going to be a fact that goes in your favor.
Okay. Sounds good. So I think that that covers everything I need to do on the scene. I guess I probably also need to contact my insurance company, right?
We recommend that you contact the Uber and Lyft personnel through the app. Let them know that you are in an accident. A lot of drivers are hesitant to do that. They'll say, well, once I let Uber or Lyft know, I might get suspended or I might get deactivated.
Right. Temporarily, right, while they investigate or whatever.
Sure. And there's a risk that you do, get suspended while there's an investigation. But why it's so important to let them know is that we want to trigger their insurance policy. We want to make sure that you're covered through their insurance, just in case this person that hit you either is uninsured or doesn't have enough insurance. We're going to go through the company. And if you don't put them on notice, we can sometimes get in a tough spot.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like it's so important to kind of walk through these steps, because I've literally told drivers that they need to contact Uber and Lyft's insurance first, but it's been a while since we've gotten a reader question, and I've never been in that situation. So I probably would have screwed up the process right there. I would have called my insurance company first.
Yeah. And your insurance, if you've got passengers in the car, you're in period 3, your insurance doesn't really have anything to do with it.
Gotcha.
Because Uber is going to be your primary insurance company, or Lyft. When I say Uber, I'm talking about Uber or Lyft.
Yeah. Okay. So I've contacted Uber or Lyft, and now, let's say it's either later that day or the next day, and I have this busted up car. I'm unable to drive, unable to make money. And I think this is where we end up, hearing from a lot of drivers, and where I think it's so unique, because with a rideshare driver, when your car is, in an accident, right? You literally cannot work. So obviously now time is of the essence. And I guess, what should a driver be thinking about at this point? Is it sort of, all right, I need to get my car fixed as quickly as possible and back out on the road so I can make money? Or what should I be thinking about?
Well, there's two things, and we'll first talk about the property damage, but I'll just say this. If you're hurt, the primary goal is going to be to make sure that your bodily injury is taken care of, that you get the medical treatment that you need. But with regard to your damaged vehicle, yes, you want to be going through the insurance claims process, opening up a claim with the at-fault driver's insurance company.
Gotcha.
And the reason why that's important is, let's say the driver who hit you at State Farm. So you want to call State Farm and let them know your insured driver caused a rear end accident,
Right.
and I need my car fixed as soon as possible because, like you said, Harry, time is of the essence. I'm not getting paid while my car is damaged. I can't get back on the app while my car is damaged. The reason why we go to the at-fault driver's insurance is because that's going to save you money on a deductible.
Gotcha.
If you go to Uber or to Lyft and ask them to fix your car, it'll get done. They'll, you are covered through their policy. But for Uber, there's $1,000 deductible. For Lyft, there's a $2,500 deductible, meaning you've got to pay that money up front in order to get your car fixed.
Wow.
Or said another way, if there's $10,000 of damage to your vehicle, they're going to give you that damage minus the deductible. So, $9,000 for Uber and $7,500 for Lyft. Well, that's not enough money to fix your car.
Yeah.
You've got $10,000 of damage, not $7,500. If you go through the at-fault driver's insurance company, you're not going to have to pay that.
Interesting. So I guess that begs the question, what if I'm at fault? Am I sort of screwed?
Insurance is there to protect you from personal liability.
Okay.
And with regard to bodily injury, so if you're hurt and you cause the accident, it's going to be difficult for you to collect on those medical bills, on the lost wages.
Okay.
If you have property damage, you're going to be covered through the Uber and Lyft policies, but you're going to have to pay those deductibles.
Gotcha.
So being at fault does put you in a tougher spot.
Right. And so I guess it's really kind of the deductible that you would have to worry about in that situation. So let's say, I'm a great driver. The other driver was at fault. And, now I've sort of started a claim. You mentioned lost wages and medical. I mean, are these things, typically, right, I think drivers in general, right, if they get into an accident, they're looking to get their car fixed. But with an Uber or Lyft driver, it sounds like there's a few other things that I guess do they need to ask for it? Or I'm assuming, the other person's insurance isn't willingly going to give me a bunch of money, right?
Right. Insurance companies are not in the business of handing out money.
Yeah.
That's not what keeps the lights on for them. What I recommend, if you are injured, that's when you really need a lawyer.
Gotcha.
And that's exactly what LegalRideshare does.
Okay.
So LegalRideshare helps people who have medical bills, who have lost wages because of an injury that they've sustained. And that's when a lawyer will really add benefit to your case. Insurance companies often try to lowball people who come in unrepresented, and as soon as a lawyer gets involved, there's going to be value added, which means more money for you.
Yeah. I mean, if let's say I was injured and I had a broken arm or, something like that, I mean, how would I don't even know how I would go about that process. Would I have to pay for all the medical bills up front and then negotiate with the at-fault driver's insurance? Or, I mean, I don't even know if it's possible to do it, right?
Well, that's again where the lawyer's expertise comes into play and their ability to navigate that world. And what I mean by that is we work with the insurance companies on the auto policies. We work with networks of medical providers, and we work with the injured party. And if you kind of imagine a triangle with those 3 points, we make sure that everybody's working together to get the patient, the client, the treatment that they need.
Right.
Where they don't have to pay out of pocket if they don't have health insurance or can't pay those bills up front. We put them in touch with doctors who are willing to provide the treatment for no cost up front. And then we work with the insurance companies to make sure that those bills are covered at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're unrepresented, you're not going to get the benefit of those relationships.
Yeah.
Harry, like you said, if you broke your arm and you didn't have a lawyer to help navigate that process, then the hospital's going to send you a bill and say, we just put your arm in a cast and you owe us $10,000.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be in a really hard position financially and physically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can sort of see how a lot a lot of those issues would add up. So, I mean, definitely it seems like that, if you're in the event of an injury, I guess that's why they call them personal injury attorneys. In that event, you would definitely it seems to be kind of a no-brainer to go that route. And so as far as other things like lost wages and damage to your car, I mean, I've talked to some drivers and I've sort of given them advice. Hey, you can show all of your pay statements. You've been working for Uber and Lyft for the past 3 months. Is there any sort of advice there? I mean, how do I get, is it possible even to get lost wages from these companies since I can't work?
Yes, it is. And the way that we prove that is we ask for the pay stubs or images, through the apps. You can look back at your history and show how much you were making per week or per month. And we say, okay, let's look back, 3 or 4 months, and it will show on average you were making, $900 a week.
Yeah.
We can then show that you were off work for a period of time because of the injury. Say you were off for a month. Well, given that average of $900 a week, well, then we're going to ask for that amount of money in lost wages for that month that you were off. 900 times 4. I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician. What's that? 3,600. So, that's how we prove that you were earning one thing before the incident, you were unable to work because of it, and now you need to be reimbursed for those wages.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So are there any other items that I guess drivers, I don't know if I would call it eligible for, but that they sort of need to be thinking about in the event of an accident that they need to kind of make sure they go after? When
you are involved in a personal injury claim, you're entitled to medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, and what we call loss in normal life. And what that means is essentially temporary or permanent disability. When you are going to the doctors, you want to be clear about how this injury has affected you, what you're able to do, what causes you pain or you're entirely prevented from doing because of the injury. So, for instance, I can't pick up my daughter because every time I bend down, my back hurts. Yeah. Or I'm responsible for the grocery shopping, and because of my broken arm, my wife has to do that now. Those points are going to make it into the medical records, and then we show that to the insurance company and say, look at the pain, the suffering, and the disability that my client went through. Those are all compensable.
Gotcha. Interesting. So, I mean, I think we're sort of getting into the space where an average person or driver really isn't going to be able to do a lot of this on their own, right? You guys are the experts when it comes to this type of work, right? And it seems like, because obviously you can get the lost wages. That might be a few $1,000s, and that'll obviously be a big help and get your car fixed, which I think is pretty standard. And I've been in an accident before, and that's kind of, I've gone through that process. But it sounds like there are a couple other areas where you guys can really help with it. So I'm curious to know, how do you engage or work with these rideshare drivers specifically? Do you charge them money, or do you take money at the end?
So we work on a contingency basis, and what that means is that we never get paid by the client. We don't call the client and say, you need to send me a check for our work. Wow. We're so confident in our ability to recover for the client that we charge a fee at the end of the case, and if we don't win, then we don't get paid.
Gotcha.
It's as simple as that. We want to make sure that the client is able to get the treatment and it has the resources that they need to get better. And we have been doing this with such a success rate that it's worth it for us to take the risk of no money up front. To try to put the client in a better position later. Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely seems like you're providing a ton of value for drivers who, frankly, probably don't have a ton of money to spend on a lawyer, especially at the start. And if I get into an accident, it's a very stressful time, maybe emotionally, maybe even physically, and, then of course, financially. And now I have this option of working with LegalRideshare, and you guys don't charge them anything up front. But of course, if you win, you do charge something on the back end. I mean, it seems sort of like a no-brainer for any, I know you're a little biased, but it seems, when you were sort of describing the services to me and, the drivers that you've worked with and helped, it seems like a no-brainer. If I'm a driver, I get into an accident, the other person's at fault. Like, why wouldn't, is there any reason why I shouldn't use a lawyer? If you're injured, you need a lawyer. That's my take on the issue. If you don't have an injury, if we're talking purely property damage, a lot of times I think the driver can't handle that themselves.
Okay.
We tell them it doesn't make sense for us to go fight for the cost of the property damage, because that's the most you're ever going to get. And if I take a fee from that, well, then you don't have enough money to fix your car.
That's a good point.
So we're happy to provide consultations and answer questions and take phone calls for drivers who have property damage questions. But at the end of the day, I would tell you that my advice will be, I think you can handle that aspect alone.
Yeah. That's actually a really good answer, and I think it totally makes a lot of sense. It's one of the reasons why we recommend drivers go speak with Legal Rideshare is because of the advice that you give, and because you do clearly have drivers' best interests. You're not trying to take any and every case. I was actually kind of curious to hear your answer to that question, and after I asked it, I was like, "Wait, was that a stupid question?" No, I think it's okay after you answered it. But that makes sense, right? Because if the damage is only a couple $1,000 and it's a new bumper or whatever it might be, if you guys went through that whole process and took a fee, you probably wouldn't make a ton of money for your time and effort, and I wouldn't have enough money to actually fix my car.
Well, if we were to go through that process with you, we would get paid at the end of the day, but you wouldn't get the result that you wanted. And that's not fair. Yeah. I would much rather answer a couple questions for you on the phone, point you in the right direction, and then have you get the outcome that puts you back on the road.
Yeah. Definitely. Cool. That makes total sense. And no, I think it's definitely a great service you guys are providing for drivers. Are there specific drivers that you work with? You're based in Chicago, Illinois, right?
Correct. So we primarily work with Illinois drivers, but we take calls from around the country. Okay. I had a call from Arizona earlier today. I got a call from New Jersey on Friday. Drivers are coming to us because we are the ones who know how to answer these questions.
Gotcha.
A lot of drivers will call us and say, I talked to 3 personal injury lawyers in my home state, New Jersey or Arizona or wherever, and none of them had a grasp of what rideshare even was. They'll say, oh yeah, Uber, Lyft, I take it all the time. But as soon as you start talking the nitty-gritty, period 1, period 2, period 3, the app was on, the app was off, the driver recognizes right away that the lawyer doesn't have any idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because those facts are very relevant to which insurance policies kick in, how you're going to be covered, and how ultimately you're going to recover for the damages that you sustained.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I know when we first started, talking about rideshare insurance, we got a lot of the same questions and problems from drivers. They were reaching out to us and saying, hey, I reached out to this insurance agent and told him I needed rideshare insurance. And of course, these agents, they're glad to sign you up. They'll, I think probably lawyers similarly, right? If you come to them with a case, or if they come to you with a case, or, the agents, they come to you asking for a quote, they're more than happy, even if they don't necessarily understand the product. And so I think it definitely is important to kind of make sure you're working with someone who really, clearly understands it. And I think it's cool that you're even actually going out and driving for Uber and Lyft. So not only do you have the experience on the law side, but you also sort of have the experience of actually driving and knowing what it's like to pick up someone who has the potential to puke in your back seat, right?
Exactly. I want to be able to have a real relationship with my clients. And how can you do that if you've never actually walked the walk? Being behind the wheel has given me such perspective on what it's like to be an Uber or Lyft driver, the challenges that you face every single day. The first day I drove, I can't tell you how many times I blew past a passenger pickup spot, only to see their hand in my rearview mirror going, stop, stop, stop. So, I get it. And it's so important that we can have that personal relationship where, when you tell me these are the things that I'm limited in doing, these are the ways that my injury has affected my life, I can say, you know what, I understand, and we're going to help you recover for that.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, so if I'm a driver in Illinois, it sounds like I can definitely give you a call and even potentially work with you. And it also sounds though, if I'm a driver outside of Illinois, really any driver who gets into an accident or has a question, it sounds like you take those calls. And what kind of services can you provide, I guess, to drivers in Illinois and maybe outside of Illinois?
So in Illinois, we full service, no questions asked. You know, if you have questions, we will answer them. If we think that we can help you, you know, if our services would be beneficial to you, we can sign you up as a client and get started working right away. We actually offer in-person and virtual consultations.
Very cool.
And what I mean by that is we've computer software that allows us to do paperwork online if it's more convenient for you than, you know, coming into the downtown office and, you know, paying for parking and you know, doing all that. For clients outside of Illinois, we are able to provide essentially the same services. We can answer phone calls, we can answer questions, and we can even sign you up as a client. We can't file a lawsuit for you outside of Illinois, but what we do, and the reason for that is because we're not licensed in every state, you know,
right,
in the U.S. You've got to be licensed to file the lawsuit. What we do, though, is we work with other law firms throughout the country who we trust and who we can, you know, refer you to and work with to make sure that you're taken care of. So if you're injured in Las Vegas, if you're injured in San Diego, you can give us a call and we will make sure that you're taken care of from point of contact forward.
Gotcha. And so what is the best way to get a hold of you guys? Is it a phone call, or how do you prefer drivers reach out to you?
Through our website, we have a contact us form, which is a great way to give us a little bit of information about what happened, about the injury, about the accident, and that's just LegalRideshare.com. You can also call us at 312-767-2222, and you can email me personally at Bryant, Bryant, at LegalRideshare.com.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think I'm going to put that phone number in my phone right now, because I imagine that, you know, if I get into an accident and, you know, I've interviewed you, I've listened to this podcast, I've read up, and then it happens and I'm like, oh wait, crap, what do I do? I need someone who's an expert to explain this all to me again, probably.
Well, Harry, I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Bryant, no, I think it's a great service that you guys are providing for drivers. And I mean, you know, I know when you first described it to me and kind of explained it, it almost sounded a little too good to be true. It was like, hey, I have the opportunity. Well, obviously it's not a great situation to get into an accident, but if it is, I have the ability, if the other driver's at fault, to work with a law firm like LegalRideshare. You guys will cover me, you'll help me get medical, you'll help me get my lost wages and pain and suffering, and potentially, you know, kind of really negate any ill effects from an accident. And then at the end, you guys do obviously take a fee, but it's only if you sort of win the case, I guess, as you put it, or maybe some of these don't even go to trial.
Yep. You know, most of them don't go to trial.
Okay.
We have a high success rate in terms of settlement, meaning quicker outcomes for our clients. You know, there's situations when a insurance company is playing hardball and says, we don't believe that the case is as valuable as you do. You're going to have to fight us tooth and nail for it. Well, then we go to court and we prove to them that we're right. But most of the time, we're able to work with the insurance company and show why the claim is worth what we say it's worth.
Got it.
And get that positive result before going in front of a judge.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and leave all of that contact info that you shared in the show notes of this episode. And is there anything, before we let you go, is there anything you think drivers should know out there, or anything else we didn't cover?
You know, I think we did a pretty good job of going over the pre-accident, during accident, and post-accident playbook. If you have any questions, though, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to clear up anything that maybe I was unclear about, or that you'd like a little bit more information on. Cool.
That's awesome. That's really helpful. Thanks for coming on, Bryant.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Big thanks one more time to Bryant Greening from LegalRideshare for coming on the podcast. And really, you know, I know that I learned a ton of information. And on the podcast, when I asked him the question about, you know, insurance and who I should contact, I sort of knew that in my head, the right answer, and I kind of forgot in the moment. So it was sort of funny to see that even for someone like me who's kind of well-versed in what to do and what you shouldn't do, I make mistakes sometimes. And so I think it's definitely handy to stay up to date. And, you know, one of the reasons why I love working working with Bryant is that he just provides, and he loves providing so much value to drivers. So he's an advertiser around the site, and we've been recommending his services to drivers. And when we first started chatting, Bryant and I, he was telling me, how he's walking drivers through the process. And the one thing that I couldn't get over is that, this didn't seem like, when I think about the traditional lawyer and maybe even the traditional personal injury lawyer, the guy I was picturing in my head was not Bryant. Bryant seems much more like the types of people that I've had on the podcast in the past, right? People who are obviously in this as a business, but they're also looking to do as much as they can to help drivers. And obviously Bryant isn't going to be able to work with everyone. And at the same time, though, I can tell that he also isn't turning people away. Obviously some drivers will come to him and he'll end up working with them, and others he knows that he probably won't be able to work with them, but he still wants to help them and do as much as he can. Now, he probably isn't going to go and take a 2-hour phone call with you, but if it's a couple simple questions, we've got great feedback so far from our readers and Bryant and the services that he offers. So you can sort of tell I'm a big fan of Bryant. I'm a big fan of the services that he offers. And I just think it's such a no-brainer. I'd be curious to know from you guys if you can sort of foresee any situation where it wouldn't make sense to use a personal injury lawyer. I really liked Bryant's answer to that question, but I know for me, thinking about navigating the insurance side of things, the medical doctor side of things, right? If you do get into a serious accident, not to mention the fact that you won't have money coming in, and really just super stressful time physically, mentally, emotionally, maybe your family too. There's just so much that can go wrong in that situation. So it just seems like such a no-brainer to use someone like Bryant. And, that's why I'm so excited to be partnering with him and really sharing the information and walking through that process. I learned a ton. So that was cool for me to see all that. And if you guys do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Bryant. I know he's great at responding to readers. And, like I said, you can get some free law advice. So definitely, we'll leave links in the show notes to check out all of his information. Subscribe to the email. Obviously, if you have any questions for myself, you can always contact me via email, social media, pretty much anywhere that I am. And I also want to give one last shout out for Stride Tax. So if you guys aren't tracking your mileage yet, that's probably the one thing that you should do. Maybe after getting a dash cam, I'll let Brian's recommendation come first. But then next, mileage tracking app, because it's going to save you so much money come tax time. And you could end up offsetting a ton of your income, if not all of your income, and pay next to nothing in taxes, which is obviously pretty cool. So it's available on Android and iOS. It's totally free, and we'll leave our affiliate link in the show notes. So if you sign up with our affiliate link, we'll receive a small commission, or you can go directly to therideshareguy.com/go/stride, STRIDE. So hopefully you guys all have a great week, everyone, and don't forget to drive smarter, not harder.